Today we're reading from the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 29, the explanation of devotional service, and we'll take up our reading at text number 22. Yo mam sarveshu bhuteshu santam atmanamishvaram hitvarcham bhajate maudyad basmanyeva juhoti sa. The first word in the verse is yah, one who. Mam, you can repeat. Mam means me. Sarveshu, in all. Bhuteshu. Santam, being present. Atmanam, the Paramatma. Ishvaram, the Supreme Lord. So, what does the first line mean? I mean, the first line means the first two lines. It's just stacked. So what does the first line mean? Don't look at the word for word. Just show the Sanskrit. Move it down. No, not all at once, just one at a time. One person volunteer. Go ahead, take the mic. Tech support on aisle 3, yes.
One who sees in all living entities.
Sees what?
The second, Atmanam Ishvara.
No, line 1 is, there's 2 lines in this. Yes. The first line is the first 2 lines.
Okay. One who sees in all living entities, the super soul that is present in the heart.
Okay. Anybody else had anything else to say about that? You all agree? Yes.
Here, the word also santam is mentioned. Somebody who is spiritually enlightened. I don't know, I'm just guessing.
Santam,
I don't know.
being present.
Okay, santam is present actually, yeah. Atmanam Ishvaram. Okay. Ishvara as the Atma.
So what does it mean, Ishvara? Do you agree? Ishvaram means the controller. Are we the Ishvara? How do you know? You have empirical evidence that you're not the controller? No? Not so much? Kennedy?
I was going to say, if any of us have ever tried to control anything.
Didn't work out so well? Yeah?
Prabhupada says in his purports that we are minute Ishwaras, but we are not. And we also try to control small because we're part of Krishna.
Okay. Anybody else have to anything say? Shastric evidence, anything? Where do you find a verse that has the word Ishvara in it? Let's have 4 verses that have the word Ishvara in it with a small commentary, not all at once, one at a time.
Ishvara sarva bhutanam.
Go ahead, do the whole thing and give a full commentary.
Ishvara sarva bhutanam hridayeshi arjuna tishtati. Brahmayan sarva bhutani yantra rudani maya. Ishvara sarva bhutanam hridayeshi arjuna. So Krishna is saying that Ishvara is present as sarva bhutani. He's present in every living entity. As Paramatma. That's what he's saying to Arjuna. And those living entities are hridayeshi arjuna tishtati. Brahma, yantra rudani maya. So correct me if I'm wrong. I'm thinking about the senses. You know, they're using the senses.
Yantra means a machine.
Machine, okay. So they're using this machine, Yantra Rudani Maya, under the influence of the Maya Devi.
Anybody have anything more to say about the verse? Go ahead, Priya. No? Oh, it's a famous verse. Who wants to say more about this particular verse? Ishvara sarva bhutanam hridayeshi arjuna tishtati. Yes.
Actually, it refers to the living entities who are situated in the bodily machines. They are trying to enjoy, which is under the direction of the Maya, Yantra Rudani Maya.
What about Yantra? Say more about that, somebody. Somebody else.
Yantra
Yantra Rudrani Maya Ya. It's a machine made out of material energy, right? So the living entity is, Krishna speaking the verse, no? So he's saying that the living entity is riding on this machine made of material energy. Check and see if you have one. Do you have a machine made of material energy? Check in. It's a machine, right? Say yes, it's not you. It's your machine you're riding in. Yantra Rudrani Maya. It's made out of material energy. Confirm. Yeah, not spiritual body. It's your machine body. And so Krishna says, I'm there. I travel with you wherever you go. Whatever new machine you take, I go there with you as the Ishvara. Okay? Anything more? Yes? Give Sharad the...
Another verse.
Keep it
Hare
close.
Kṛṣṇa. Hare Kṛṣṇa Raj. Avajananti mamudha manushim tanumashritam param bhavamajanantam mama bhuta maheshwaram. So maha ishwaram. So that's another verse that has Ishvara.
Say the verse again.
Avajananti mamudha manushim tanumashritam param bhavamajanantah mama bhuta maheshwaram.
Is that the last line?
Is that the
Look it up. Yeah?
param bhavamajanantah?
Mamba Bhuta Maheshwara. Okay, say something about it.
Yeah, so I mean, in that verse, Krishna is explaining to Arjuna about how fools deride him when they see that the Lord appears in the material world, appearing to be an ordinary person, but actually he has, he's not, his body is not material, but it belongs to the spiritual energy.
Okay. Go ahead.
From the Ishopanishad, Ishavasya idam sarvam yat kinchya jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bunjita magrida krasya siddhanam. That verse says that everything animate or inanimate within this universe is controlled and owned by the Lord, and therefore one should only accept things that are necessary for himself, and they're set aside as his quota.
And one should not accept other things,
that do not belong.
knowing well to whom they belong, right? Does all things animate and inanimate cover pretty much everything? Is it a solid contract? Attorneys? How many law students we have in here? None? All engineering? Okay. So, yeah, it covers everything. And so he says in this verse, Ishavasyam midam sarvam, that if we have this conception that Ishavasya, that there's a supreme controller who controls and owns everything, and we act in that way, the next verse says, Kurvane viha karmani jijiva shikshatam samaha evam tvainanyate tostina karma lipitena. You don't get karma. And this is true in tax law also. If you're a person who knows the tax law and you don't own anything, there are many people who have money, but then they don't own it on paper because it belongs somewhere else. It's just at their disposal as part of a larger entity, like in a corporation. Corporation owns everything, and the person then is given the right to use certain things within the corporation, but technically on paper they're not his or hers. They belong to the corporation. So that person isn't individually taxed for it because it's just using it in the service of the company. For instance, they take a flight somewhere, it was based on a company business, and then that they don't have to pay tax on that. Any accountants? No accountants? No accountants? No lawyers? Okay. So in the same way, Ishavasya spirit means that if you recognize the truth, that is, I don't own anything, it all belongs to Ishvara. And therefore you move in the world, but you don't take any, you don't claim any of it for yourself. You just say, oh, it's all a write-off because I'm using it all for Krishna. I'm not touching anything because whatever I touch, it's not for me. I don't claim it as my own. Tena tyaktena bunjita, anything that's been set aside for my quota, I use that and nothing else. Then you don't get karma. Okay, was one more. Times 5. Okay, one more. We'll move on, and everyone else will have a chance for more.
Ishvara Paramakrishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. So Ishvara Paramakrishna, the controller of all controllers, who is Krishna, Ishvara Paramakrishna, Satchid Ananda Vigraha, eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. Vigraha means one who is full of.
He has a form.
Is
like
the
that.
form, yes. Anadi means without any beginning. Adi means meaning the first. Govinda, who.
Lord of the cows.
Yeah. Sarva Karana Karanam. He is the cause of all causes.
Okay.
It's the first verse of
The low-hanging fruit for that one. So in this verse, Yo mam sarveshu bhuteshu. Sarveshu, everyone knows, means all. Bhuteshu, living entities. So santam atmanam ishvaram. So the words again are one who is able to notice that the super soul, the Paramatma, is present within all living beings. So take a look around. See if you see any living beings in here. Any living beings? There's a few. And notice that, or just theoretically see that the super soul is present within the heart. And also see the body as a yantra. It's just a machine made of material energy. The real presence, the living entity, is there within the body, but there's not just one. There's two living entities. One is the individual soul, and the other is the super soul, the paramātma, the supreme soul, is there present within everyone's body. Isn't that amazing? Say yes. Yes. It's amazing. Okay, let's look at the next few lines in the word for word. Now, this next word is hitva. Hitva means disregarding. Archam, the deity. Bhajate, worships. Maudyat, because of ignorance. Basmani, into ashes. Where did you think of the word basmani somewhere else? Verse 17. Right? Verse 17 of the Sri Ishopanishad. Who can say that one? No, it's not here on Mayene Patrena. Vayur anilam amritam. It's the one we love. Vayur ani, because it's so macabre. Vayur anilam amritam atedam bashvantam shariram om kratos smara kritam smara kratos smara kritam smara. Let this temporary body be burnt to basmantam, ashes. So we got ashes are a metaphor here for something that's useless. Okay, basmantam. We basmani, into ashes. Eva, only. Juhoti means offers oblations. So juhoti, who knows where else the word juhoti is used? Yakoroti arashnasi yasjuhoshi dadasiyat. Whatever you offer to me, yeah, whatever you offer, do it as an offering to me. And then saha, he. And here's the translation. One who worships the deity of Godhead in the temples, but does not know that the Supreme Lord as Paramatma is situated in every living entity's heart, must be in ignorance, and is compared to one who offers oblations into ashes. Let's say it together. One who worships the deity of Godhead in the temples, but does not know that the Supreme Lord, as Paramatma, is situated in every living entity's heart, must be in ignorance, and is compared to one who offers oblations into ashes. And here's your purport by Srila Prabhupada. It is stated clearly herein that the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his plenary expansion of Supersoul is present in all living entities. The living entities have 8,400,000 different kinds of bodies, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is living in every body, both as the individual soul and as the supersoul. Since the individual soul is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, in that sense, the Lord is living in every body. And as supersoul, the Lord is also present as a witness. In both cases, the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every living entity and everywhere else are in the mode, did I miss something? The presence of God in every living entity is essential. Therefore, persons who profess to belong to some religious sect but who do not feel the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every living entity and everywhere else are in the mode of? That's pretty low, right? Doesn't get any lower than that. If without this preliminary knowledge of the Lord's omnipresence, one simply attaches himself to the rituals in a temple, church, or mosque, it is as if he were offering butter into ashes rather than into fire. One offers sacrifices by pouring clarified butter into a fire and chanting Vedic mantras. But even if there are Vedic mantras and all conditions are favorable, if the clarified butter is poured onto ashes, then such a sacrifice will be useless. In other words, a devotee should not ignore any living entity. In other words, a devotee should not ignore any living entity. Let's say that together. In other words, a devotee should not ignore any. So going by that statement, what would you give as a definition for a devotee? Take the mic. I don't want to hear it all at once. Go ahead. Vaisesika. Turn it into a positive definition of a devotee. A devotee is one who?
A devotee is the one who respects everyone, shows respect to everyone.
That's nice, respect. Okay. Devotee is one who respects everything, every living entity. How does that sit with you? Do you like the sound of it? To respect every living entity? Or we should hate some people and like others? What is your opinion? Which sounds better to you? Anshu? Respecting? Okay.
A devotee is one who gives attention to everyone.
Gives attention to everyone. Okay. Anyone else? A devotee is?
A devotee is someone who's mindful of everyone.
Mindful of everyone. Very nice.
A devotee is one who makes everyone feel like they have a sign around them that says, "Make me feel special."
Okay, Shastra Sar?
Devotee is the friend of every living entity.
Friend of all living entities, okay. Yes?
One who sees God in everybody.
One who sees God in everyone. So the devotee, yes, Kennedy? Last one.
The devotee is the one who can acknowledge Krishna's presence in each individual.
Acknowledge Krishna's presence in each individual. Those are all nice. And so Prabhupada says here, in other words, a devotee should not ignore any living entity. The devotee must know that in every living entity, however insignificant he may be, what's the most insignificant kind of living entity you can think of? An ant. Could have been a violinist in last life, right? So the ant, any other insignificant living entity? Mosquito. That's the most significant living entity. It's the most dangerous entity on earth, actually. But we still respect the fact that the super soul's within the heart. We can also marvel at the creation, because although Boeing and Airbus can make large airplanes, they can't make a tiny one that's this big that can fly around and land properly and get back up, what to speak of reproduce. So the devotee must know that in every living entity, however insignificant he may be, even an ant, God is present, and therefore every living entity should be kindly treated. Who said kind? Kindly treated, and should not be subjected to any violence. I see nowadays there's a lot of tattoos. You can get a lot of lines in. You can put all this on there if you want to get it. All these lines you can tattoo. Bona fide. In modern civilized society, slaughterhouses are regularly maintained and supported by a certain type of religious principle. But without knowledge of the presence of God in every living entity, any so-called advancement of human civilization, either spiritual or material, is to be understood as being in the mode of ignorance. But without knowledge of the presence of God in every living entity, any so-called advancement of human civilization, either spiritual or material, is to be understood as being in the mode of ignorance. So the practice of Krishna consciousness is summarized by Bhaktivinoda Thakur when he says, Jive doi Krishna nam sarva dharma sar. Who knows what that means? Jive doi. Yes, Prabhu. And by the way, welcome. Thank you for bringing your traveling party from Los Angeles. Let's welcome our brahmacharis.
Thank you, Vaiśeṣika Prabhu. This is Jiva Doi, means compassion towards all jivas. And what was the next one? Nam Ruchi?
Krishna Nam.
Krishna Nam is the holy name of Krishna.
Sarva Dharma Sar.
This is the essence of all dharma or religious principles.
The essence of all religious principle is to show compassion to living beings by giving them Krishna consciousness, giving them the holy names, giving them information about the spiritual world. And when we're isolated and we have some ritual where we're worshiping God and where we disregard the living entity, then this is compared to offering ghee on ashes. You're not getting connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, nor is it pleasing to Him. So the gradations of devotees are mentioned in the Shastra. It says, Acharyam eva haraye pujam yasharaye hate na tad bhakteshu chanyeshu sabhakta prakrita smrita. There's a way in which the Havi Yogendra describes the various levels of devotees. So the lowest of all is someone who's a devotee in name only, called a prakrita bhakta, means materialistic, which is a contradiction in terms, because a devotee actually is not material or materialistic, but it's transcendental. However, it's mentioned here that the person who is only interested in worshiping the deity, archaryam eva hare pujam yashradeya hate, their only faith is in the deity. They don't see that two entities they don't see mentioned in this verse, natad bhakteshu. They don't understand how worshipable devotees are. In fact, in the Bhagavatam, madbhakta puja bhyadika, Krishna says in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, if you want to worship me, the proper way is to worship my devotee. In the story of Bahulasva and what's his counterpart? Śukadeva, there's a way that one of them is very poor and the other one's rich. So Krishna comes to see both of them because they're both pure devotees. So Krishna likes to be with his devotees. And who did he bring with him to meet with Bahulasva and Śukadeva? Pretty much everybody. He brought Vyasadeva and a host of other sages, and he brought them on his chariot. And generally, sadhus don't like to ride on chariots. At least back then. Nowadays it's necessary. Prabhupada talked about flying around the world 14 times in a jet. He said this is utilizing the material energy in Krishna's service. But out of principle, sadhus would eschew the use of vehicles like a chariot. But when Krishna asks you to get in his chariot, then you don't say, no thanks, I'd rather walk. So they all got on the chariot and they went with Krishna on this excursion to meet these two great devotees. Each was a pure devotee, but each had a different circumstance. That's instructive in and of itself, because one was a king and the other was a pauper, at least very poor, lived a very simple life. And when they went on the journey, people lined up along the roadside to get a glimpse of Krishna. And all the chariot was going very fast. Krishna, in his omniscience and omnipresence and being omnipotent, was able to make eye contact with every one of them. I remember once when I was a kid, I used to go to Mexico regularly with my parents, especially during Easter break. We'd all pile in the VW microbus and drive down to Mexico. And one time when we were there, the president of Mexico was traveling cross country, and everyone came out of their houses and lined the roads for miles and miles and miles, and they all put on their best outfits, and they all had flowers, and then when the president went by, it was in a motorcade, and he went very fast down the road. And Krishna did the same thing, only he was able to reciprocate with everybody along the way. The president of Mexico, not so much. And when they arrived, that is Krishna and the sages, near the residences of Śukadeva and Bahulashva, then Krishna, to accommodate both of them at the same time, expanded himself, but not just himself, also the sages. That's Krishna's power. That he wanted to see them both at the same time, and he also did so in such a way that they both felt that he was only going to see them. And who was the king and who was the pauper? A reminder, please. Śukadeva and Bahulashva. Look it up. So he went to their home. So he went to the home of the king first, and I'll tell you who that was in just a second. And when he went there, he was given a royal reception, as were all the sages, because that was the facility that he had. And he also went to the king is Bahulashva. And Bahulashva gave a royal reception, royal feast, ornate sitting arrangements for everyone, washed Krishna's lotus feet, took the water on his head, and then also at Śukadev's house, although Śukadeva only had a little straw mat he could offer anybody, and a little water, not so much facility. But Krishna was equally satisfied. And at the house of Śukadeva, Śukadeva began glorifying Krishna. And he did so much that Krishna stopped him and said, too much glorification. He said, all these sages are here. He said, you glorify them, don't glorify me. It's profound because Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God and all the sages there. But he was noticeably annoyed that he was over-glorifying Krishna and not glorifying the sages. This is based on the principle that Aradhanam sarvesham Vishnu aradhanam param tasmat paratanam devi. Last line, tadyanam samarchana. That if you want to offer the best kind of worship to Krishna, then you worship tadiya, those things that are dear to Krishna, most dear to Krishna. And this is indicative of the way it's that Madbhakta Puja Vyadika, Krishna says, look up, see where that verse comes from in the 10th canto. Maybe it's in relationship to this story. Madbhakta Puja Vyadika means if you want to worship me, then worship my bhaktas. And we also hear Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha. Next line. Vedeshu Durlabham. You may be a great scholar and study the Vedas, but that's very difficult. It's prohibitive. You can't understand Krishna. Vedeshu Durlabham Adurlabham. But Adurlabham, what's the path of Adurlabham? Means it's not very difficult to attain. I'm a bhakta, my devotee. If you worship my devotee, then Adurlabham, it's very easy. It's simple to come to me, he says. And so this advanced devotional service is to understand what pleases Krishna the most. To please Krishna's tadiya, or his devotees. Whereas the lowest position, this so-called devotional service is mentioned here. Archayam eva hare, pujam yasharayete. You think you're worshiping Krishna. It's like, oh yeah, Krishna's in the temple and I see his form there and I'm doing puja to him. But then when the devotee comes, I ignore him. In fact, in the padatis that talk about deity worship, when you're worshiping the deities and a devotee comes, you're supposed to make sure that the devotee is satisfied and then you go back to your deity worship. Because the bhakta is more important than worshiping Krishna in Krishna's eyes. So you wouldn't want to ignore the devotee and then just, I'm worshiping Krishna, forget about the devotee. This is Vaishnava culture. Where does it come from? 11th canto, 19th chapter. What's the name of the chapter? Perfection of spiritual knowledge. And can you say the context? Better take a microphone because this is a detailed operation here. Whatever you can give me.
It comes in a series of 4 verses or 5 verses, and I can read the translation of them. It says, "Firm faith in the blissful narrations of my pastimes, constant chanting of my glories, unwavering attachment to ceremonial worship of me, praising me through beautiful hymns, great respect for my devotional service, offering obeisances with the entire body, performing first-class worship of my devotees, consciousness of me in all living entities, offering of ordinary bodily activities in my devotional service, use of words to describe my qualities, offering the mind to me, rejection of all material desires, giving up wealth for my devotional service, renouncing material sense gratification and happiness, and performing all desirable activities such as charity, sacrifice, chanting, vows, and austerities with the purpose of achieving me. These constitute actual religious principles by which those human beings who have actually surrendered themselves to me automatically develop love for me. What other purpose or goal could remain for my devotee?"
Who would like to attain all of those qualities? Okay. Just the desire to have them. I read in a letter, Prabhupada, a very sincere gentleman had written to Prabhupada and saying, I wish I could be sincere in the practice of devotional service. And Prabhupada said, the desire to be sincere is the same as being sincere. And so those who are attracted to these qualities and want to attain them, means, at least in a fledgling way, that the attainment of them, and then one can focus one's attention on devotional service with the goal of attaining these qualities. So back to the point at hand, which is that bhakta puja vyadika, if one, Krishna or Kavi Yogendra says, Archayam eva hare pujam yashrayete, natad bhakteshu, if you don't recognize the devotees and worship the devotees in the proper ways, then you're not considered to be a proper devotee. And I'll give you an example. Yesterday, when we were in the vicinity of Market and Powell, I don't know what the cross street is where we were doing our Harinam, do you? Well, we were somewhere down there, and we were having a Harinam Sankirtan. And I started noticing that there were some devotees down there in the crowd, but they were a little covered. There was one gentleman who was drinking, but he didn't want to leave the kirtan. And he kept doing this. He came around. We saw him a few times coming up and down the street, but when the Harinam started, he camped out right in front. And someone came over, I don't know who it was, but someone came over and gave him a mat to sit on. Who did that? Was it one of ours? It was, who? Ananda Chaitanya Prabhu offered him a mat to sit on? That, I think, was a very thoughtful thing to do. That's the spirit of the Sankirtan movement. If somebody comes near and obviously wants to hear, we make facility. That's why we build a temple. It's like a little mat to sit on for people, because it's like, you want to hear something about God? Come here, you can sit down. If we're on the street and somebody comes and they show some proclivity that they want to hear the holy name like he did, and he's showing respect, he was even saying Hare Kṛṣṇa, then as it says in the Upadeshamrita, Krishneti yasa giritam manasadriyeta. So that person who shows respect to the holy name or says the holy name, Hare Kṛṣṇa, that person, we should show regard. In our mind, we should be thinking in a worshipful way, this person is very special. In fact, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, if I hear one person in the crowd say Hare Kṛṣṇa, then I consider that person amongst all the multitude of other people to be the best. Because, of course, aho batasha pachato gariyan, yajiva revan vartate nama tubhyam, tipus tapaste juhuvusasna arya brahmana churnama granante ete. As Devahuti says, oh, this person is special because he or she said Hare Kṛṣṇa. It means they've graduated from many other kinds of insignificant rituals in the Vedas and been to all holy places personified. This is a kind of honoring of that person. There were other people. There was an elderly gentleman. I don't know, I think, Malini, were you facilitating him? Yes, she's online somewhere. She was. There was a gentleman with white hair, and he came over, and what was his story? Uh-oh. Malini got off the plane and then just went downtown all night to distribute books. We lost contact. So,
Prabhu, can you hear me?
Oh no, what happened?
Prabhu, I lost my voice, Prabhu.
Not very good.
Prabhu, he came looking for a self-realization book, and he said he likes Paramahamsa Yogananda. And I showed him the science of self-realization. I showed the Bhagavad Gita, and I showed him the Maha Mantra. He was really interested. So I said, why don't you sit down and listen to the mantra? So he sat on gave him a chair. He was hesitating where to sit. So when he gave him the chair, he sat down, and he was chanting the mantra from the card.
So what Malini did was first-class worship. You find a person, anybody in the crowd, and they want to hear Hare Kṛṣṇa. They want to come closer to Krishna, and you go out of your way to facilitate them. You give them a chair, you give them water, you give them whatever they want, and let them be there and hear the holy name, because you know that that's first-class worship of the Lord within the heart. Because tapyante loka-tāpena sādhavaḥ prāyaśo paramārādhanaṁ tadi puruṣasyākhilātmanaḥ. Lord Śiva says a statement, Dhanavari. Lord Śiva says, or Śukadeva says about Lord Śiva, said, look at Lord Śiva. When the time to save the universe came, he didn't hesitate. He took a sacrifice on himself. It's not really pleasant to drink poison, is it? Say no. Yeah, it's not pleasant to drink poison. But Lord Śiva, when he saw the universe was being threatened and all the living entities, he said, I'll do it. And so he swallowed it because he's the supreme mystic. He was able to hold it in his throat. And that's why his throat turned blue. So check everyone if they've ever drank poison. See a blue throat. Actually, you just die. Lord Śiva doesn't die because he's so powerful. But he did it, Śukadeva Gosvāmī says, as a form of worship, because he understood that paramārādhanaṁ. Aradhana means worship. And the paramārādhanaṁ means the supreme worship is tapyante loka-tāpena, for the sake of helping the people of the world, all the living entities. You go out of your way, you perform some tapasya in order to save them, to do good for them. He said, that's the best way to worship God, who's in everyone's heart. Because that's the purpose. Krishna has a purpose for the creation, right? Say yes. It's not random. It's not existentialism that's like, oh, there's no meaning to the world. There is a meaning to the world. And the real meaning is to give every living entity a chance to go back to Godhead and not toil here in the material world. So let me see if I can trace my steps back. This kind of observation that you said, who gave the chair? Who gave the mat? Anant Chaitanya gave a mat to that person who I was feeling sorry for him because he's a devotee, but he couldn't stop drinking. He was pouring it into a paper cup to try to be a little discreet. but he was drinking nonetheless, but he couldn't leave the holy name, and he wanted to chant, and he offered as obeisances to the Vaishnavas and so forth. And this other man, for whatever reasons, he had some sense, I want to be close to the chanting. He recognized this is spiritual. So when you find people like that, to offer them all facility, this is a kind of worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's what Prabhupada did. What are books? They're a facility to take all the information in one place so that a person, any person who has the wherewithal to do so, can absorb it and improve their life. And it's the preoccupation of Vaishnavas. They're paradukha-dukhi. They suffer when they see other people suffering. They want to give them the advantage of getting knowledge so they can rise above it. We should feel sorry for that person, that let me help him rise above this habit of becoming intoxicated so they could just live a blissful life in control of their senses and using their senses sarvapari vinirmuktam in the service of Krishna. So that's the first observation of where devotees are amongst the crowd in the world. If somebody shows some inclination and they go like this, or they say Hare Kṛṣṇa, or even if they dance a little bit as they go by, kind of wave, these are all indications of some inclination towards Krishna. We should take it. Who came up to me with a cigarette lighter yesterday? Jaikanai Prabhu came up very triumphantly and said, I got a cigarette lighter. And I was thinking about that as fire is sacred, actually, but it's profaned in the use we have today. Here's the contrast between Vedic culture and the modern so-called culture. What is the verse? Safam rajastamayiti prakritir gunas tire. No, that's not the verse. I want the verse that says that, because mode of ignorance, mode of passion, partivad dharano dumas tasmad agni trayimayaha tamasastu rajas tasmat sattvam yad brahmadarshan. It's mentioned in there, the mode of goodness, like fire. Why is fire good? You Vedic sacrifice. That's beyond what most people think of when they think of fire. Even in the best university in America, they'll talk about fire in many different contexts, but not that one. They're not going to say fire is good because you can offer things into it for God. Right? Students, you all go to the best schools. Do they mention that? No, not so much. It hasn't come up. Okay, so that's the culture where you're thinking fire is there for the purpose of offering sacrifice to God, and that's real happiness. Fire in downtown San Francisco, it's a cigarette lighter. It's for puffing on smoke and breathing it into your lungs, and it's like, hey, I feel great. This is the contrast in the cultures. So when we see somebody emerge from that mire of ignorance, and they have some inclination, any inclination towards Krishna, towards the vibration of the spiritual world, towards the scene where it's obvious that the devotees are trying to do good for the world, then our worship is to go out of our way to facilitate them, to do everything that we possibly can to bring them closer, to give them a seat in the kirtan, in the community, in the temple. That's real worship. That's the highest kind of worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And minus that, okay, we have God. We have our God. We have the God, or whatever way we want to say it, and then we have our own thing, but we don't have the open-heartedness to go out and bring everybody in as close as possible. Then I'll read the verse again. One who worships the deity of Godhead in the temples but does not know that the Supreme Lord as Paramatma is situated in every living entity's heart must be in ignorance as compared to one who offers oblations into ashes. And within the purport, there's already lines that are designated as bona fide for getting a tattoo on your way home. Okay, so now let's have discussion. You can object, or you can concur, you can offer more evidence.
I really like the point that you made about how we use fire in the material world, because I was thinking during Dhammadashtakam this month, Agni is here to hand deliver our service to Krishna on our behalf, and it's such a wonderful service. And with the purity of fire as well, when we are purified, they talk about burning up our sins. It's something else that internal fire does. And the more pure we become, the more we reflect those minute traits of Krishna that we've mentioned as well. And the more that we reflect him, and we can be a covered devotee or we can be a pure devotee, but to whatever extent that we can directly reflect Krishna into the world around us, we improve the world around us. And the more we can reflect the transcendental platform to others. Yes, and the metaphor of fire is something that Krishna uses, as you alluded to, in the Bhagavad Gita, where he calls Jnana Agni Sarvakarmanam. This means, Jnana Agni means that there's a fire of knowledge. And that fire can burn up unlimited sinful reactions of any living entity. Means that distribution of knowledge is the greatest kind of worship of Krishna and sacrifice that one can make. That's why it was important that we have the Bhagavad Gita in huge stacks, the bigger the better, and distribute to as many people as possible. That's actual worship of Krishna within the heart. It's the distributing the Jnana Agni. And once Prabhupada said, because we were being assailed by many lawsuits. Some people were suing because they said we weren't a bona fide religion. Other people said because you're brainwashing people and so forth. There was quite an assault from many different kinds of people who didn't appreciate the new look of the religious practice on the streets and so forth. And Prabhupada had mentioned in one conversation he said that these books, when distributed, will act like fire. And he said the fire has already started. He said now they can bring big fire brigades, but it doesn't matter, the fire will still burn on. So we can think of it like that. The material world is this dense forest of ignorance, and the more that we distribute the fire of knowledge, the more that ignorance, the forest of ignorance is burned down. Okay, a couple more comments? Uh-oh. Okay, Dhanavari, go ahead. And then we'll go to Priya Kishori, and then, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Hare Kṛṣṇa, Guru Maharaj, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you for the nice class and the verse. And I have a problem like respecting people who eat meat or like drink, and even in family gathering or social gathering. And I'm reading this, I know that I should respect them as they are living entity and they are part of Krishna. What is the best way to like not to judge them at the same time? And they are not, you can't give them, they're not interested in this religious discussion, but at the same time, how do I gain, like not that I'm hating, but I don't feel like I want to respect them or something. What is the best way to like gain and not to judge them? And
yeah, this is an excellent question and very important.
Thank you.
First is, as Prabhupada mentions, in Yastu Sarvani Bhutani Atmani Vanu Pashyati Sarva Bhuteshu Chatmanam Tato Navi Jugupsate. From? Should know where that's from. From? Are you sure? You positive? Say yes. Okay. He says, don't try to imitate an Uttama Adhikari. Although the two verses, Yasmin Sarvani Bhutani Atmai Vad Budvijanataha, etc., say in the Sri Upanishad, you should see if you see all living entities as parts of Krishna, then you won't hate anything or any being. And meanwhile, Prabhupada says, don't imitate the Uttama Adhikari who actually sees like that. So what should we do? Which is your question. That comes in the next verse, which is Ishvare Taradineshu, next verse from the 11th canto, the Srimad Bhagavatam, after Archaryam Eva Hareye, means Ishvare Taradineshu Balisheshu Dusatsucha Prema Maitri Kripopeksha Yakaroti Samadhyamaha. That means that the Madhyama Adhikari, the one who is deputed, have you been deputed to do good for the world? Say yes. Raise your hand. Raise your hands. You're all deputized. So you're deputed to go out and help the world, help the people of the world, right? Say yes. Yes. So, Ishvare Taradineshu, there's 4 types of people and categories of entities that you should observe and different ways to interact with them. You ready? Say yes. So the first one, Ishvare, who's that? Krishna. That's what we talked about in the beginning. Ishvare Taradineshu. So you should see Krishna. You should also see Krishna's devotees. You should also see the innocent. Who are the innocent? Those who are not averse to Krishna. They have an open mind. They don't know anything about Krishna, but they're open to it. And then the third one is Dvisatsu. Those have an aversion to Krishna. They don't like it. They don't like what you're doing. They don't like the idea. For one reason or another, they're not into it, right? So there's 4 types of people. The first is Krishna. You should develop your love. Prema. Then Maitri means friendship for the devotees. Wherever there's devotees, you should try to develop a friendship. Sometimes it's closer. You don't have the same relationship with every devotee. Some from a distance, you have appreciation. Some very close, as you're like-minded and you just want to be around the person all the time. Maitri, Kripa. Kripa means mercy. So for the innocent, those people who are open to Krishna, your job, your mission, should you decide to accept it, is to pour in as much mercy as possible. That's how you should organize your life. How can I give mercy to the living entities? That's first-class worship. But what about the envious people who don't want to hear it? Well, I'm going to save you a lot of time and trouble, and you can thank me later. Kripopeksha. Upeksha means you should leave them alone. Don't get involved. Don't try to jam it in there. Don't try to shoot the ball when you're going to obviously get blocked by somebody who's 6'6". Smash the ball back down. Just wait for the easy shot. And so you're given this, but if you avoid those people, which you're supposed to do, you're also supposed to pray for them. And Jiva Goswami adds that. From a distance. Let them go. Don't try to twist their arm. Don't chase them down the street. Let them go, but offer a prayer. Krishna, please empower me to reach the hearts of such people in the future. Give me the wherewithal to do it. That's our duty. Okay, Pre-Kishori. We're moving fast now because we're running out of time.
So this verse that we read in the 3rd canto reminded me of a verse that Radhanath Maharaj quotes quite often, which is Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavi Hastini Shuni Chaiva Swapake Cha Pandita Samadarshina. There's a part of the purport so the verse means the humble sage by virtue of true knowledge sees with equal vision a learned and gentle brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater or an outcast. And in the purport, it says a Krishna-conscious person does not make any distinction between species or caste. The brahmana and the outcast may be different from the social point of view. A dog, a cow, or an elephant may be different from the viewpoint of species, but these differences are meaningless from the viewpoint of a learned. This is due to their relation with the Supreme, for the Supreme Lord by his plenary portion as Paramatma is present in everyone's heart. Such an understanding of the Supreme is real knowledge.
Animals are people too. And we should be really careful to observe that the Supreme Personality of God is there within the heart of every living being and act accordingly. And respect. We should have respect for them. We should also not, again, artificially act as if we have the same relationship with animals as we do with sadhus or something like that. That's an artificial way. If animals want to join our kirtan party, they're perfectly welcome. Animal can come. Cows I have a book written by Janananda Swami, Animals in Krishna Consciousness. I believe it was Malaysia or Indonesia. I can't remember which country he was stationed in, but there was a cow that came to every Mangalartik. She'd just walk in. When the devotees did the Nrsimha prayers, she'd sit down too. She'd come and listen to the Bhagavatam class. They're welcome. If any cow wants to come in here. And if you're on parikram and the dog comes along and says, can I join? It's like, of course. Of course you can join. And Shivananda saying, it's the beginning of the Antya Lila, of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. A dog joins the kirtan party and wants to go see Mahaprabhu and said, yeah, you can come too. Sometimes little spiders come and they swing down while you're reading the Bhagavatam. It's like, what are you doing? What are you reading there? It's like, I don't know if you'll understand, but you can listen, see what happens. And there's so many stories in the Gita Mahatmya about birds sitting in a tree when somebody was chanting their chapter of Bhagavatam, doing their chad, and they became liberated. Dead bodies came back to life and so forth. So, we should know that the transcendental vibration benefits all living entities, including plants. Haridas Thakur said the loud chanting of Hare Kṛṣṇa is better than the soft chanting because it goes out to all the living entities, moving, non-moving, and it gives them a chance. And we felt that yesterday because, practically speaking, people are so covered by ignorance. Sorry if I'm on a soapbox this morning, don't mind. But people are so covered that it's almost as if they're dead. You could just feel it. And so when you're in the Dham and then you come to another environment, you go like, wow, this one's alive, that one's dead. Here everyone's looking for Krishna, here everyone's looking to avoid Krishna. But the Sankirtan wakes everybody up. Jeev Jago, and that's glorious. It's so fulfilling to be able to be the ones who represent Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to make the vibration, put the vibration into books and make sure it goes out into their homes and everything like that so that they can take advantage of it. We just want to do good for the world, right? Say yes. Okay, who's next? We have several. Oh, you were next. Okay. Representing the whole Sacramento Yatra, go ahead. No pressure.
So since we were talking about fire, I was thinking of this verse from Shīrshopanishad that I pray before going to bed. Agnenaya supatharai asman vishwani deva vayunani vidvan yuyud asma juhranameno bhuistam te nama uktim vidhema. It took me a while. It took me like months to really dive and appreciate the whole verse. And I was pretty amazed that Lord is so powerful, that as powerful as fire, and then our prayer is to request Him to burn our sinful reactions, because that's what holds us up in attaining the ultimate goal of serving Krishna eternally. So as I recited this more and more, I appreciated it more, and then I could understand the depth of it, like what a role Krishna plays in burning our sinful reactions. Thank you.
Thanks for entering that verse into evidence. It's a very well-placed and powerful metaphor.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much for the wonderful discussion. Prabhuji, I was thinking about this word, pouring oblations into the ashes. So basically, unless one gets purified by worshipping the deities, he may not have the vision to see the Paramatma situated in the hearts of all living entities. So these two seem contradictory to me. So can you please explain more on that?
The two things go together, Bhagavat Marga and Panchatrik Vidhi. And in our culture, luckily, because we're under the shelter of Rupa, Sanatana, and Jiva Gosvāmī, they've laid the groundwork, or they've set the mood and the attitude for everybody. So although we worship the deity in the temple has become a place where we bring people. It's not that we just close the doors and we worship the deity, although it's absolutely necessary to purify the senses, to be engaged in Panchatrik Vidhi, and we have to see the deity, so do all the other people too. Unless they get introduced to deity worship, there's a way that they'll still remain impersonalists in one way or another. So it's absolutely necessary, but the mixture is there. It's described that there's two tracks. There's deity worship, and there's also the wide preaching of the Bhagavatam and the holy names spreading, and our train, the train of our movement and our personal progress moves on these two tracks at the same time. That's the genius of our sampradaya, and that's why it's important to have an acharya, which is to know what is the proper mood and what is our proper placement. And Prabhupada has fine-tuned that. You'll notice that he advocated that we all go out, distribute Krishna consciousness to others, and that we bring people back to see the deity and worship the deity. In fact, we get more pleasure in watching other people come and see the deity than we do in just seeing the deity ourselves. At least we should anyway. Isn't it true when somebody comes in and they worship the deity? And who was telling me yesterday that they distributed a book at Union Square? And then who? Niharika was saying she had distributed a book, or many books. She distributed lots of books at Union Square. Way to go, Niharika. And she saw some of the people reading them. And so that gave her more of a thrill than reading it herself practically, because she saw a new person looking at the book reading. So the mood of deity worship should be also preaching to the outside world. In fact, in some places, like my god brother Shiva Swami, who's a consummate Sankirtan devotee, and in Krishna Volgi near Budapest, he has a big farm, and the deity worship is at a very, very high standard. He's very exacting. In fact, he goes around with a white glove. I think I'm going to do that. And he checks every surface, see how is it? Has it been cleaned? And everything is first class. But the whole temple room is set up as a theater. And when people come there, and they do, to see the farm and the deities and everything like that, this community that lives outside of Budapest, buses come. People come in and they sit them all down in front of the deities, and then they tell about them. And then there's a contraption. It's a rope, a silk rope that goes over to the side of the altar. You've probably seen these in India, but you could pull it like this, and then there's a peacock fan that fans the deity. So all the people can line up, and then they pull the rope and it fans the deity, and they're involved. The idea is, we're not just there to worship the deity, but why are we shoche tato vimukha cetasa indriyartha? We just read that from Prahlad Maharaj. He said, I don't want to live in the forest. I don't want to go to the Himalayas, he said, either. No vows of silence for me. I want to live in the big cities where all the people are, where they're carrying this burden of ignorance. And shoche tato vimukha cetasa, he said, that's where my lamentation is. So when we have deity worship, what we're thinking is, let people be integrated into the culture of deity worship, let them see the deity and become part of it. So the two are mixed together, and they're both necessary at the same time. Who's next? We had two more. Okay, you forgot? Oh, online? No.
Yes. I had a question, Prabhu. Welcome back to the ISV.
Thank you.
So, Prabhu, regarding offering respect, normally what happens, some devotees are advanced, I can say, and it's easy to offer respect to them. And then some devotees whom I think I can help, and there also it's not difficult to determine the level of respect and offer the respect. But then there are some devotees whom I consider kind of equal to me. And that's where it gets a little more challenging to offer the proper respect. So can you please give some practical advice and tips on that?
But follow Lord Chaitanya's advice. He said, Chernadapi sunichena, toror api sahishnuna, amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. Prepare yourself to meet the world by being very humble, and also by showing respect to everybody and not expecting any respect in return. And if you practice that in all circumstances, then you'll find very harmonious relationships. It's a practice. Would anybody like to try it today? Yes. Okay, 3 or 4 people said yes. Everybody else, feel free to be as caustic in your relationship as you wish. No, just keep it in mind. That includes your best friends, your spouse. Did everybody shudder? I'm not going to show respect to my spouse. Whoever it may be, try showing respect and see how it goes. You'll become instantly self-realized if you do that, because then you start thinking, oh, I'm not my ego, and then my ego's not offended because I've suspended it for the day. So you have to be conscious and cultivate, and even amongst God brothers who are equals, we should be careful. Just be a little careful, because relationships change over time, and the more we're on the side of being a little careful, then the better it is. I mean, my God brothers, whatever relationship I have with them, I call them Prabhu. It's respectful. I have some people write back and say, don't call me Prabhu, Prabhu. Okay, Prabhu. But that feeling should be there at all times. Be a little careful, because as I was talking to Devamrita Swami one time, and I was saying, oh, that God brother is very sensitive. And he said, we're all sensitive. Everybody's sensitive, so be really careful with people. And just know that whatever we say, do, it goes in. And it's better to be aware and conscious of how we're dealing with people. But mostly, we should be aware of our own sense of expectation. What do I expect? Do I expect some respect? And if the giving respect is not so hard, you've heard this before, but let me say it again, but not expecting any respect in return. That could be a rub point, but if you renounce that, there's a lot of things to renounce, like say, oh, I'm only eating salad for Kartik, that's it. Okay, well that's not so hard, because you can always throw a few nuts in there or whatever, but extra salad oil. So, but if you'd say, I'm going to renounce taking respect from other people, see how that fits. And guess what? It fits just fine, because the ego is just a plague for us. It's always needling us that, oh, they should have looked at you better. They should have not cut in line. They touched your shoe. Why did they touch your shoe? Don't they know who I am? And so forth. Just all these kinds of harassments by the false ego are not necessary. And Lord Chaitanya has given us carte blanche to just cut that part out of our life. And it won't be an appendage that we needed. It's actually unnecessary. Just practice it in all circumstances, and relationships go 100% better when we're in that position. The sort of idea, I live to be corrected. One caveat is that we don't accept bullying, and we also don't tolerate abuse by other people. If that comes into play and it reaches a threshold of that, just because you're not showing respect, it doesn't mean that you have to tolerate it and be a doormat. It has to be dealt with, because in any relationship or any community or society, bullying and abusing others is not allowed. And it has to be dealt with quickly and decisively. Om Tat Sat. And we have one online. Oh, look, it's Śukadeva. Śukadeva, are you in Vrindavan or Delhi or what? It's cold there, I think. How could it be that you're on mute, Śukadeva? Śukadeva can do anything. We were in a room in Govardhan. Well, that's good. I can talk about him since you can't talk. But
Hare Kṛṣṇa.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Śukadeva.
Yes, Guruji, thank you so much for a wonderful class. I was thinking of one verse in 4th canto, which we read in Govardhan, in which it is said that Lord eats through two mouths. One is fire, and one is through the mouth of the devotees. So I was correlating this verse today with today's verse, that if we put the oblation in the ashes, it will not reach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Similarly, if we worship the Lord but don't respect his devotees or the other living entities who are his part and parcel, so it will be not that much beneficial.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And it's more evidence to show how the culture is to worship the devotees, to feed the Lord through the devotees, and so forth. And that's the advanced concept of devotional service. What to speak of giving mercy to all living beings, which is extremely advanced concept and is Jive Doi Krishnanam Sarva Dharma Sar. It's the essence of Dharma, is to show compassion for other living beings, starting with oneself. Don't let your mind and ego beat you up and treat you like you're worthless. Have respect for yourself also as a devotee, in the sense of that we're better, we shouldn't be profaned by the urges of the mind and senses, but we should rise above it and come to our own glory as servants of the Lord. Om Tats, or as I say in Japan, Om Tato Sato. I felt that for the regulars down there, like the police, were such a welcome sight. You can imagine being downtown every day. It's the same old thing. It's people doing their little shtick, which means like some routine they do to make money downtown, and it's, boring and a little ostentatious in some cases, and then there's the regular stuff going on down there. There's a lot of people who are down and out. There's a lot of crime. In any case, I just noticed that when we're down there, the police, as an example, amongst others, when they'd go by, they'd always smile, they'd take a book, they'd appreciate. Because it's just so different. The energy of the devotees distributing books and chanting Harinam is so different from the regular shtick that goes on down there, that everyone just trying to hustle something. But the devotees are so bright, and the music and the food and all that kind of stuff. In many places, or even in San Francisco, in days gone by, they would have stopped us from distributing food. And they just, there was a group called Food Not Bombs, and they were always trying to distribute food, and they'd always get stopped because they didn't have the proper permits. You gotta have a special kitchen, et cetera, et cetera. But they just let everything slide because everything's so degraded down there that they think like, hey, more power to you. It's that same attitude years ago when I lost my airport. And by the way, SFO is the airport, it's not San Francisco. Could we get that straight? Because when you're catching a train, if you go to SFO, you're going to the airport, not San Francisco. SFO, ORD means, ORD means O'Hare Airport. Everyone, they all have a 3-letter code, and SFO means the airport. So if you tell somebody SFO who thinks in terms of using these codes properly, you might send them to the wrong place. Any case, I was distributing books down at Fisherman's Wharf because I lost my airport during the Gulf War. And when police were harassing everybody, but they saw me and they go, "What are you selling, books?" He goes, "Go ahead." As if that's what you're supposed to do, right? Instead of just asking for money and things like that. So congratulations to everyone. Shamalungi, well done keeping the team going to organize these big events. There's a lot that we can look at in retrospective to ramp up for the next time, even looking at other spots and making the presentation even better than it was. So that's what we look forward to. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Malini, for organizing everything, and the team members for making sure that the books were there front and center. It's really hard to get everything down there on time, and then it's stacked up, and then what to speak it, take it down at the end of the day. That's even harder. But you did it in grand fashion. Well done. Hare Kṛṣṇa. That brings us to